from Pontes Books, here with the Chapter 29 fun fact for The Prince and the Pauper. Today's fun fact draws inspiration from our king through the majority of this time period that the story is talking about, leading up to where Edward kind of takes over, and that is Henry VIII, but also a lot of other monarchs at this time and after this time even. But this really translates into a modern day context as well. So though we draw our inspiration from the characters in the story, it's really applicable to today's life as well. So today's fun fact is taking a look at a leadership style where the leader is leading by fear. Okay, so using fear as your leadership strategy, I guess you could say. So looking at The Prince and the Pauper, so if you watched our last video on the heads on London Bridge, this is really the same excerpt from that, but I'll read it again just because that is where we get our fun fact as well. So about 10 o'clock on the night of the 19th of February, they stopped upon London Bridge in the midst of a writhing, struggling jam of howling and hurrahing people whose beer jolly faces stood out strongly in the glare of from manifold torches. And at that instant, the decaying head of some former duke or other grandee tumbled down between them. The late good king is but 3 weeks dead and 3 days in his grave, and already the adornments which he took such pains to select from prominent people for his noble bridge are falling. So this quote is really showing off a structure that was put in place long before Henry VIII came around, but one that he continued with a vengeance, or with strength. And that was the tradition of displaying heads up on the London Bridge in order to scare people into basically following his rules. So in this chapter, and like I said, I talked about it in the previous video, basically one of the heads falls down and kind of chaos ensues. But I just wanted to highlight that this was a practice that many kings would use in order to make, among other things, make their subjects fear them. And they used all sorts of different tactics in order to lead by fear. So kind of looking at more of a modern day context, but some of these things could still apply to some of these kings that used fear to control their subjects. Some characteristics of somebody who is a fear-based leader. So one is that their identity is really their only source of power. So their only way of having some sort of control and feeling like they are important. So they value their reputation above all else. Oftentimes they don't feel whole or healthy. There's something about them that, you know, there's some self-consciousness, or there are some faults that they are hiding, and they're covering that up by having this intimidating attitude towards those who they are leading. Oftentimes they live in kind of the black and white in terms of people being friends or an enemy. There is no in between. People are either fully supportive of you or they're against you. So if you think of, you know, these monarchs, if you did anything, committed anything that you considered treason, you know, you would execute them, right? There was no in between. There was no disagreeing with you, but still respecting you as a human. It was black or white, friend or enemy. They desire trophies and, you know, accolades for their accomplishments to help to continue to build that lack of self-esteem that they are often feeling. They often don't want to learn anything new. They don't want new strategies. They don't want new ways of thinking coming into their circles. They appreciate the things the way that they've always have been and don't want to innovate. And then lastly, it kind of related to these trophies, they're also addicted to these measurements. So being able to celebrate those victories by having all sorts of data and numbers to represent some of those accomplishments. So those are some characteristics. Now we're just going to look at some of the reasons why fear-based leadership doesn't work. There are probably way more. This is just a few that I was able to find. So one, it can get in the way of people's cognitive abilities. If we think of kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when it comes to your safety, your physical and your mental safety, if that's not being met, then you can't move up and be able to do more types of creative thinking. And because you're feeling unsafe because that work environment or that living environment or wherever this leader is controlling you is not making you feel safe. It also can cause resentment and revenge. So some people will be, very willing to, like, they'll give in to the fear of this particular leader and will do whatever it takes to not upset that person. But on the inside, they might be resenting what they have to do or the way they have to act or to work. Or some people might not even just take it and bury it. Like some people might speak up and say things and try and get revenge. It's only a matter of time. And we see this in history. And this is a common kind of, like, Shakespeare uses this kind of idea, is like these people who try and make people fear them. Eventually there's someone who comes along who's not afraid and will overthrow them or, do something because they just can't take it anymore, the way that they're treating people. It can trigger a fight or flight response. And again, that kind of, you can't think clearly when you're still in that fight or flight mode. It can disengage the team and stop teamwork, people from working together, and also stops people from speaking up and sharing their opinions because they're afraid of being kind of shot down or getting in trouble for voicing their thoughts. So leading by fear is probably not the best way to lead. There are other methodologies or frameworks for how leaders can lead in their workplace or in their community, or whatever your thing that you are leading happens to be, that can be a lot more effective and will cause less resentment and more teamwork and productivity. So that is leading by fear. Hopefully you learned something. Have a good rest of your day.